All right, so Jason Kenney came out yesterday and said again that vaccination will not be mandatory in Alberta. But for starters, this is something we already suspected and already knew. And that number one, I mean, I don't think there's any province that has talked about making them mandatory. I don't think that the Trudeau government has talked seriously about making them mandatory. I'm sure they would want to. I'm sure they would hint around at the idea. I mean, Global News does it all the time, and CBC does it all the time, and whatnot. But that's never really been the plan. That's never really been the plan because even if the overwhelming majority of people support making them mandatory, which isn't true, it's not true. I think it's even Global's own polls show the majority don't support it. But regardless, even if the majority support it, I don't think they would be a good look because if you're having to round people up, strap them down, and vaccinate them, that's a bad look. That's a really bad look. So that's not what they're going to do. What they're going to do is, I mean, what we've been saying, what we've been thinking all along is that the big corporations are just going to slowly force it on people, right? They're going to slowly force it on people. I mean, another scenario I've heard brought up that's I think a pretty clever idea, at least from their perspective, is they'll come out with a UBI, right? They'll come out with a UBI and make a caveat to said UBI that the amount of money you get is proportional to the percentage of people that go along with the vaccines and whatever other social credit stuff they want people to go along with, right? So if you have friends that don't have it, then that's going to look really bad because you're going to have these people that are like, oh yeah, we're starving over here, and we would get more money if you just got your vaccine, right? That's how they're going to do it, and that's how that is the better way of doing it, right? The social ostracism is the best way to run a society. The only difference being is that you can have a social ostracism in a free or more libertarian country, or you can have it in a communist country, right? Because communist countries have a lot of social ostracism as well, right? So that's I think how they're going to do it. They're simply eventually we're going to have the whole chip thing, or we're going to have the social credit system going, and Walmart is just not going to allow you to shop there without having it, right? And I mean, eventually it's only a matter of time till everything goes digital, right? It's only a matter of time till everything goes digital. So they'll simply have you in the system to where if you try and use your credit card or your debit card, it just won't work, right? It just won't work. So again, I think that's how they're going to go about it. And again, do I think that that's how that we're going to have this draconian system overnight? No, it's going to happen over a long period of time. It probably will take a generation for all we know. Um, but that is the route we're headed on unless people wake up. So again, it's good news they're not going to make it mandatory. And I mean, it's very good news that a lot of people are becoming skeptical of vaccines. Now, again, I'm not 100% against them too. This is the first thing you bring up to the average idiot out there whenever you become skeptical of vaccines. It's like, oh, you're a vaccine denier, right? But no, that's not the case. There is, I believe that anybody with half a brain is skeptical of vaccines. I think anybody who's fully 100% um, against vaccines versus people who think that they're 100% safe and effective and you're insane to not want to get them, both of those groups of people are equally insane, right? And the thing to point out too, I think, if anything, is the people who are 100% believing in them are the even more insane people because those are the people that have absolutely no idea what they're talking about. They've never spent 1 minute of their life looking into this kind of stuff for themselves. At least the people who are 100% against vaccines would never take one no matter what. At least they've done some research outside of the mainstream. Like, so you have to give them credit where credit is due. Um, but again, I don't know how anyone would want to take this vaccine, let alone a lot of the vaccines that are out there too. Because again, the problem with vaccines is, I mean, there's many problems, right? And the fact that the majority of people don't know this is very scary and astounding. But I mean, the main problem being with this one is that it doesn't have nearly the amount of time and effort put into it that is normally put into a vaccine, right? So that's the big problem. And the other big problems when it comes to vaccines too is that number one, they're not 100% safe and effective, and even the vaccine companies themselves will admit that, not out in the open, but by default, in that pharmaceutical companies don't have any, at least in the states. I don't know about any other countries, but I assume if it's in the States, it's everywhere. Anyway, they don't have any liability, right? They don't have any liability. So if they inject you with with whatever vaccine it is, and it paralyzes you, it gives you whatever, you can prove that, you can't sue them directly, right? Now, in the States, you can sue the government, I believe, and a lot of money is paid out from that every year. But again, if your product is safe and effective like they claim it is, then why in the world would you want immunity? And again, this is something you bring up too, that when you bring this up to the average person, it like completely blows their mind. Like it completely blows their mind. It's like showing like a caveman an iPhone, right? That's what the equivalent of this is that these people have just blindly believed what the mainstream media has told them their whole life, and when you point this kind of stuff out, it like completely blows their mind. Now again, there's other, I think, many other reasons to be skeptical of these vaccines. Number one, I mean, the crony capitalism that go again, the left hates, they like to claim how much they hate crony capitalism, but yet the vaccine, a lot of these pharma companies are like the epitome of crony capitalism, and yet they could care less about them, right? Like, if a small business owner makes a little bit more money than some, leftist thinks is a good amount, and that's the worst thing in the world. But these pharma companies are absolutely raking in the money. Bill Gates brags about how he's going to make $100 billion off his vaccine investments. 20 to 1 returns. Just imagine that, 20 to 1 returns. And are any of these leftists worried about that? They're all worried about, oh, you're making $250,000. We should be taxing like 80% of that money away and getting with, we're going to tax the doctor's money, who's, yeah, they're living comfortably, but they're not that well. But we're not worried about the guy who's brags about how he's going to make $100 billion. Like, you guys are so stupid, it's not even funny. Now, the reason why they don't do that is that when you believe in socialism, you support that kind of stuff. The socialists love those overlords where the rules don't apply to them, because the socialists are most motivated by taking money from, they like to claim it's the rich, but the really rich people always stay rich, usually get even more richer under socialism. I mean, look at the last year. Perfect example of that. The people that suffer the most under socialism are like the moderately wealthy people. These are like the doctors, the lawyers, the people that have successful small to medium sized businesses. It is never the Bezoses, the Bill Gateses of the world that suffer under socialism. But again, that's a bit of a diatribe, but nonetheless. This is from Casey Madhu, and he says, hiding behind the charter, what a reckless disregard by the NDP for the basic rights of Albertans. Sadly, I suspect they would exploit this pandemic to insert government into every aspect of your life, and they'd start by shutting down every restaurant in the province. Now, again, if the NDP were running Alberta, I don't even want to think about where we would be at right now. I think the unemployment rate would be 5 to 10% higher than it is right now. I don't think they would have allowed businesses maybe a little bit over the summer, but we would have been closed for going back probably a couple months. Um, Again, I don't even want to think what Alberta would look like under the NDP right now. And again, the UCP have plenty of problems. I won't deny that. I mean, I still don't even know if I would vote for them if there was an election like a month from now. So again, playing the bias card does not work here. But again, I think the NDP would be absolutely terrible, like absolutely terrible, because as much as people like to think that Alberta is this incredibly right leaning province, it's not true. I mean, in the rural areas, it is, but in Edmonton and Calgary, they're about as moderate comes. We have plenty of far leftists in Edmonton and Calgary, right? Plenty of them. So again, the people that think that Alberta is this far right province, it's really not true. I mean, in the rural areas, it is. In the rural areas, it definitely is, but in the big cities it isn't. Right? In the big cities it isn't. So again, this is something that's incredibly scary. And again, I don't know what's going to happen going forward, because the UCP, they haven't got a whole lot done. I mean, I think the pandemics threw a wrench into a lot of their plans. The problem being is that the pandemic has helped the left wingers, because the left wingers' solution to everything is more socialism, right? More government, which is this situation's been a complete wet dream for them, that they can implement all these more regulations, more welfare, more government, more government basically. And it has really thrown a wrench into any right-leaning province, at least actual right-leaning province, because I think Doug Ford and a lot of these kind of people are about as fake as conservatives can possibly come. So again, it's very scary to think where Alberta would be at under the NDP, like incredibly scary. And the fact that they seem to be polling relatively even with the UCP. That's pretty scary. That's pretty scary. And I think that's a testament to number one, we're not as right wing as a lot of people would like to think. And number two, the UCP haven't got a whole lot done, right? They haven't got a whole lot done. It's the same goes for Trump too. Like this is I think one of the reasons why Trump. I mean, I don't know if he actually lost. I don't think he actually lost. But I kind of doubt that he's going to stay on as president given all the corruption. But again, Trump came in here. He talked a really good game, and he didn't get enough done. Now, was there enough? Was there enough Trump could have done? I'm not sure. I'm not sure. Um, and that's the same goes for the UCP too. Like their hands are tied in so many ways. And again, the problem is we don't know exactly just how much their hands are tied. I think that's the worst part about the UCP is that we don't know how much of this stuff that they haven't got done because there's legitimately nothing they can do and that the feds or like BC are just not allowing them to get done what they want to get done as opposed to them just not trying hard enough. But again, like hiding behind the charter, this is the thing. Like again, I always point out, I just can't stand about the left. Like, just can't stand. You point out how we're losing our rights in a lot of ways. We don't even have rights in Canada, and they're like, "Oh no, we have the charter, right? We have the charter. We have free speech because the charter says so." But you know, you guys are supporting um, getting rid of everything, like every one of those rights, right? Like, and again, you don't just have rights when it's convenient. That's not how it works. The whole point of free speech, the whole point of the right to assemble, the whole point of all this stuff is that so you have it when it's not convenient. That is the whole point. But these people are too stupid to recognize that. Now, the reason that they don't want to do it is because it doesn't benefit them politically, right? Like um, keeping your business open right now is, they again the NDP wants socialism. Their wet dream right now is a UBI. And if we open up businesses again, then there's no reason to do it because people can just go back to work, right? So again, it just completely it's entirely a political thing. And this is the thing, one of the many reasons too why I'm so against these lockdowns is that we have um, governments are just using it to try and benefit themselves politically. So yeah, a good point by Casey Madhu here. And speaking of craziness, this is from Cesar Sacchetti. He says this happened to Dr. Andreas Nowak in Germany after the unconstitutional approval of the infection law. Police broke into his house while he was having a live stream on YouTube. Those who cried against fascism have created the most criminal dictatorship in history. Now, again, this is just it seems like one of the endless examples of legitimate authoritarianism going on in these days, and yet why aren't more people complaining, right? Why aren't more people complaining, right? Like these are the same people that think that there's a fascist as premier of Alberta, there's a fascist as president of the U.S., but yet they support this kind of stuff. Like just imagine if Trump was doing this to people who disagree with him politically. Just imagine. I mean, that would be a legitimate reason to call him a fascist, right? But again, this has nothing to do with fascism. This has nothing to do with everything. It is entirely a political thing, and it's so predictable. It's not even funny. Like once you start to pay attention to this kind of stuff, it's so predictable. It's not even funny, right? It's not even funny. And again, the fact that stuff like this goes on and it appears like only a small percentage of the population actually cares, I think is incredibly scary as well. Like it's incredibly scary as well. And the last thing to bring up here from Mike McMullen, he says politics in Canada has shifted to the far left. That even having an independent thought makes you far right, at least according to the fake news. Now again, it's something I pointed out a lot, in that it just astounds me how you have these people that are clearly far left. Like if they're not far left, they're closer to the far left than they are to the center at the very least, and yet they like to claim they're centrist, right? And they like to claim that the conservatives and people like Trump are far right, which is absolute insanity. Like Trump has positions that would have been considered too far to the left to get elected as recently as like 15 or 20 years ago, right? Like Nobody would have gotten elected being pro-gay marriage 15 or 20 years ago. No, not even Obama, not even Hillary at the time. No major Democrat was pro-gay marriage up until about 10 years ago. Trump is also pro-marijuana legalization, at least at the state level, right? That is not something that's been popular on either side for maybe for the going back, 20 years, right? Trump is more anti-war than pretty much anyone on either side at this point, right? So same goes for the conservatives too. Like, what position do the conservatives have now that is to the right of a position that they had 20 years ago? Like, please tell me. They can't tell you. So the reality is the entire political spectrum has shifted to the left, which is why the PPC and Wexit has came in to a place where the conservatives would have traditionally been, right? Maybe they're slightly to the right of where a conservative traditionally would have been, but not that far. And again, it's very funny too that if this is another reason that that these leftists are completely wrong is that they like to claim that the progressive movement is growing, right? And they're right about that. They're right about that. But the part that they're wrong about is that if the liberals are still center left, right? If the liberals and the NDP are still center left, which they aren't, but let's just pretend they are, then where is the party that represents all these people that are further to the left, right? The quote unquote progressives. Like, where is it? Well, the reality is that the NDP and the liberals are far left, and the conservatives are more to the center, right? So again, none of what they say makes any sense. Like, you sit back and think about it for 30 seconds, and all of a sudden, like, you can debunk it within, like I said, within 30 seconds. So yeah, it's a good point by Mike McWillan. It's something I've been talking about a lot. So it makes me happy that it's not just me that's recognized this. So anyway, that's what I wanted to talk about today. If you liked the video, make sure you hit that like and subscribe if you haven't already. Make sure you check out those links below. Follow me on those other platforms. If you want to donate, you can do that as well. I appreciate whatever support I can get. And like I say, hit that like and subscribe, and stay tuned for more.